HQ presents The Revenge Pact by Liz Mistry. Read by Natasha Jayahendry. Prologue, 1971. As always, Ricky got off the train at Haymarket and made his way down the alley behind Hamish's boxing club off Morrison Street. He'd more on his mind than updating the terms and conditions of his deal with the dirty copper from Edinburgh who enjoyed lording it over the criminal scum. Fuck's sake. Only someone who thinks they're better than everyone else would insist on being called the gaffer, right? Stuck-up bastard. Glad of the cover of darkness, which he planned to make good use of, Ricky arrived early, making sure he'd time to scope the place out. There had been a time when he trusted the Edinburgh crew, but no more. He'd gambled all his money on their partnership, but then the bastards had betrayed him in the worst way imaginable. Worse than stealing his investment. Worse than stabbing him in the back over a smack deal gone wrong. Even worse than screwing his missus. Christ, if that had been all they'd done, then he could have lived with it. Licked his wounds and got on with it. But this was so much fucking worse, and the big I am Edinburgh bastard was about to pay for being part of what had gone down. Ricky ignored the nagging wee voice that sat on his shoulder, gabbing in his ear, telling him it was his own fault, that he'd been seduced by the gaffer's false promises of fame and fortune. Like every other Gorbals boy, Ricky had wanted to scramble out of destitution and give himself, his wife, and the bairns a better life than he'd had. He didn't want them growing up with empty bellies and a clout round the ear on payday from a dad who drank to forget the misery of his tawdry existence. It wasn't a bad ambition for a laddie with a growing family and few options, and Ricky was prepared to do whatever it took to succeed. He'd never had a good relationship with the police, so taking a step further into the darkness wasn't a big deal. Not when the potential to rule his city was his for the taking. Besides, he had brains, and more importantly, the gift of the gab. He already had a following of criminals with similar ambitions, but without the noose to capitalise on the opportunities presented by the heroin that was flooding the market. The other Glasgow ganglords were complacent, too bloody old to see the prospects a canny liaison could bring, too blinkered to see the potential from abroad. Their territory was ripe for the picking. With all the gallousness of youth, Ricky was ready to step in. He couldn't get enough of the white stuff for the city's demands, and there was no prospect of it drying up the gaffer's plans to oust the increasingly complacent career criminals from their respective cities. The sincerity had been encouraging, the lightness of tone appealing. A tale of two cities, eh, big man? Edinburgh and Glasgow, you and me? Ricky hadn't been sure about the posh voice, big ideas and ready smile, and he was hesitant about throwing his lot in with the police. Wee Frankie, the right-hand man, with his gruff approach, stony silences and mangled pus, was more relatable to Ricky. He was what Ricky's ma would call a bra-looking chookie. Ugly sod would have been Ricky's choice of words. Frankie was building up a reputation over in Pilton for being tough. Christ, even Ricky over in Glasgow had heard of him. Wee Frankie and the gaffer combined had connections and weren't afraid to use them. Word on the street was that, by using the gaffer's intel, wee Frankie and a couple of stooges executed a few successful post office raids. It had been the similar raids that Ricky had organised in Pollokshields that had attracted the Edinburgh's crew's attention. It had shown he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Unlike the gaffer, he'd been in the thick of it.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?